Mr. Diamond, I suppose you've been dealing with bank regulators for most of your adult life. Do you believe that the U.S. banking regulators have the statutory authority to determine how quickly America transitions to a low-carbon economy?
I do not.
I don't either.
That's your authority, yes.
That's the way I see it. But here's one of my concerns, and I'm concerned about the enormous power that some of the regulators have, especially the Fed, and power that is exercised in an opaque fashion. And so my question is, I'm not accusing anybody at the Fed of anything, but do they, as a practical matter, have the power that if they wanted to, they could effectively pressure financial institutions into directing capital where they want it?
Yeah, so speaking for myself, they are my judge, my jury, and my hangman. They pretty much can do what they want unless constrained by you. So yeah, if they wanted to come up with ways to do some of those things, they can easily do that.
Yeah. So one of the concerns that I have is the interest that some have to use the financial regulators, especially in the climate space. In Europe, of course, the ECB has broader authority than our Fed has, and they are pursuing this very aggressively. I worry that the Fed's decision to join the network of central banks and supervisors for greening the financial system and the ongoing development of these climate risk scenario analysis are a precursor to regulatory edicts, or at least pressure to debank energy companies. And that would be exercising a power that they don't legally have. Let me move on to the issue of some of America's largest money managers. We know that these managers routinely vote the shares that they hold, including the shares they hold on behalf of their customers. And they do that including for those shares invested in passive index funds. With $22 trillion in assets and an average of 25% of the votes at S&P 500 company shareholder meetings, a handful of asset managers can have, it seems to me, a huge impact on companies' decisions. Mr. Rogers, let me ask you, do you agree that the largest asset managers are capable of exercising significant influence over public companies?
Ranking member, thank you for that question. And we want to engage with all of our shareholders. We want to engage with them individually, the largest and the smallest shareholder to date. And certainly those who own more shares have more influence.
Well, so one of my concerns is that the largest asset managers in the country have joined the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative that explicitly states as its goal a stewardship and engagement strategy with a clear escalation and voting policy that is consistent with our ambition for all assets under management to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. Here's the problem. These large asset managers have enormous sway by virtue of the volume of votes they can cast, even though they don't even really own many of those shares. And of course, control, if that sway goes to the level of control, then there are significant ramifications, legal and regulatory, especially if that control is exercised over financial institutions. So I have my staff looking into this issue with the intent of producing a report on this later. Mr. Demchek, there are folks, including prominent regulators, who seem to believe that large regional banks, although not as big as GSIBs, are already too big to be resolved in the event of a crisis, and therefore they just have to be sold to one of the other banks represented at this table. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is it true that your bank is required to submit a resolution plan to the Fed and the FDIC every 3 years?
Yes, we've done so for 10 years.
Okay. Did any of those plans that you submitted contemplate as the sole resolution a government bailout or the wholesale sale to one of these other banks?
No, it's pretty easy to draw circles around our regions and sell them.
Now, the regulators are fully authorized to reject a submitted plan if they thought it was not credible or otherwise deficient. Have the regulators ever rejected your plan?
No.
So it seems to me that the approval of your plan is at least a tacit admission that there is a credible resolution plan that has been articulated. And so let me make a final point here. Some seem to think that additional regulation and added capital requirements, there's no cost, so why not? it seems to me that there is a cost of adding unnecessary capital requirements on already well-capitalized institutions. Could you share with us your perspective on what's the downside of having unnecessarily high capital requirements?
Well, in this instance, it would crowd out other financings that are needed in the market. It's also making it more expensive and difficult for us to lend at a time when our country needs it. Cost of capital went up. Funds are being used for something other than supporting our economy. It doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
North Dakota is recognized. Thank you, Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Toomey, and all of our panelists. First of all, I want to apologize for Senator Scott's implication that this isn't interesting to all Americans. I think it's a pay-per-view event. It's been very good, particularly when Senator Kennedy started asking questions. That said, I also want to thank you all, and by the way, all of your colleagues at every level of banking for delivering so well during the pandemic. We were building an airplane while flying it, and I think that you all did very well in delivering the services and the products at a time when America desperately needed it. And frankly, I think it built the foundation that's saving us today. So thank you for that. But I also want to join Senator Kennedy in this admonition. Please resist the impulse to respond to the very loud noise in your left ears. I'm happy to be the loud noise in your right ear. When it comes to, to being one of the cool crowd, I know the pressure that you feel, and I'm sorry that sometimes those of us on the conservative side aren't as activist oriented, but I want to help you. But, and this hasn't come up, so I'm going to bring it up. Last evening, I led a letter that was signed by nearly all of the Republicans on this dais, to the Bank Policy Institute, and you're all, of course, members, regarding this new merchant category code that's for gun and ammunition stores. And I want to be clear about who did this. The credit card companies are taking a lot of heat. But it's the ISO that did it. It is the International Organization for Standardization, and they did it against the wishes of the credit card companies, who opposed it in the beginning. They voted against it on the advisory committee. Their opposition was upheld, and then ISO did it anyway. And they did it at the urging of a very liberal activist bank, Amalgamated Bank. And so I want to ask each of you, as the carriers, as the acquirers, as the facilitators that are providing the capital, will you commit to me? Can you commit in front of this committee and the pay-per-view audience that's listening and watching that your bank will process all transactions for the purchase of legal goods and services, and I might add, constitutionally protected goods? We'll start with you, Mr. Scharf.
Senator, we're going to implement the rule that has to be implemented as a member of the network, and we're going to continue to process transactions as we do today.
I agree with my colleagues' comments. It won't change anything we do.
No, I totally agree, and we cannot be involved in telling the American citizens how their money will be used. That's not our job.
Similarly, Senator, we do not intend to use the code to limit or restrict the purchase of firearms by our customer base.
Senator, we don't intend to have any restrictions.
Agree with comments. We'll abide by the rule, but no restrictions.
We will not have restrictions.
Thank you all. Good answers from all of you. I do want to come back to you, Ms. Fraser, just a little bit, because Citibank has, in particular, given me some pause when your bank has voluntarily committed to restrict lending to firearm retail clients unless they meet your specific criteria, which in many cases exceeds the law. And I want just extra assurances that law-abiding gun purchasers across the country will not be discriminated against using this merchant category code as a means to an end.
Senator, thank you for the question. We respect the Second Amendment. As I said, we do not intend to use the code to restrict or limit any purchases of firearm sales by our credit card customers. We do not do so today. We do believe in best practices for the sale of, the retail sale of firearms. That is the policy that we've had for a while now. Most retailers follow those best practices.
I would say most gun owners do as well. The vast majority of them are very good people.
Indeed.
So thank you for that. I'm just going to wrap up by just inviting you all to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Moynihan. Come to North Dakota. I want to show you real progress in transitioning to a cleaner energy economy that utilizes not regulation, but rather innovation and the great riches that God has given us below, on top, and above the earth. And with that, I thank you and yield.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are all American companies,
Okay.
and I'm very proud of that. And I thank you for that, and I congratulate you on your success. It seems to me that your institutions are a lot like America. You are not perfect, but you are good. Capitalism works. That's why America has the strongest economy in all of human history. Capitalism has done more to lift people out of poverty than all the social programs put together. The poverty rate in our country is 3%. Now, the Census Bureau would tell you it's 12%. But the Census Bureau only counts cash payments, not in-kind payments. The Census Bureau doesn't count Medicaid. It doesn't count food stamps. It doesn't count the earned income tax credit. If you count all of those programs, our poverty rate is 3%. And that money didn't just to help our neighbors who are less fortunate than we are, did not come from leprechauns. It came from the American people and their generosity. And they have that money because of capitalism. Number two, I'm not going to ask you to comment on this. Senator Toomey touched on it. You will never win, never, the Uber woke sweepstakes. I understand that the pressure to run that race is fierce. You will never win it. Nothing you do will ever be enough. The uber woke people in positions of power in this town think America was evil when it was founded, and it's even more evil today. You're not going to convince them otherwise. I believe that you're not free if you can't say what you think. I encourage you to do that. I believe that you're not free if you can't. I believe that you're not free if you can't express yourself. You have your opinion. Be candid. Don't try to win the Uber woke sweepstakes. Number three, I don't like to brag about the expensive places I've been, but night before last, I went to the grocery store. Inflation is gutting the American people like a fish. Now, we know what our Federal Reserve is doing on the monetary side. I want to ask you what you think we should do, we meaning the federal government, on the fiscal side. And I want to start, if you could just give me direct answers, because I only have about a minute and a quarter, though I might ask for a little extra time with the indulgence of the chairman. Ms. Frazier, tell me what you think we should do on the fiscal side to help curtail inflation.
There is a considerable amount of savings still in the system. We don't believe that we need more additional stimulus being put through into the economy, and therefore making sure that we're supporting those that are suffering from the high prices and from what's likely to be a very challenging year ahead, that support is directed to them.
Mr. Diamond?
Yeah, I think a little less fiscal spending would be good because we had 30% of GDP spent over a 2-year period, which is literally unprecedented. But I also think in the supply side, taxation, immigration, regulation, healthcare, infrastructure, this permitting bill, if you did some of those things, you will help grow the economy to reduce inflation.
Would a tax cut be out of the question for you?
I think, I say calibrate taxes so that you create more growth.
How about get a little government off the backs of the American people in terms of regulation?
That would be helpful, I think, particularly for small business. I don't want to sit here and complain about big companies, but I urge everyone to take 10 small businesses out to lunch and ask them what it's like to live through federal, state, and local regulations, even if they have one store. And that could help a lot.
I'm sorry we don't have more time. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Senator Tester of Montana's.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.